The galaxy's most elite military academy had been training warriors for 3,000 years, but none of its instructors had ever seen a cadet vomit from watching archival footage, until today. Cadet Thrace Valen of the Andorian Republic wiped his pale blue mouth with a trembling hand, his four-fingered grip barely maintaining its hold on the desk's edge. The holographic display continued its relentless playback. Human soldiers at Iwo Jima, scrambling up volcanic beaches while machine gun fire tore through their ranks like a farmer's scythe through grain. The ones who fell were instantly replaced by more humans, who kept coming, kept climbing, kept dying. Computer, pause, croaked Instructor Kalmara, her crystalline exoskeleton dimming from its usual amber brilliance to a sickly yellow-green. She stood at the front of the lecture hall at the Galactic Defense Institute on Proxima Station, her six eyes fixed on the frozen image of a human medic dragging two wounded comrades to safety despite having lost most of his own leg. I think we should stop for today. Beside Thrace, his study partner Virix shifted uncomfortably, scales rasping against his seat. The Draconian's usual confident posture had collapsed into something approaching fetal. His species had conquered 4 star systems through sheer physical dominance. Adult Draconians could breathe fire, had regenerating scales harder than most military armor, and possessed redundant organs that made them nearly impossible to kill. Virix had bragged about his people's warrior heritage since orientation week. Now he looked like he wanted to crawl into his own chest cavity and hide. "Ma'am," Thrace managed, forcing his voice to steady despite the acid still burning his throat. "We've only watched 4 hours of the assigned 15. The presentation is tomorrow." Kalmara's translator unit crackled with her distressed harmonics. The Lumidian instructor's crystalline form pulsed erratically, light refracting through her body in jagged, anxious patterns rather than the usual smooth gradients. "I know the assignment parameters, Cadet Valen," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "But I'm beginning to question the wisdom of—" The lecture hall doors hissed open. Every head in the room swiveled to see Admiral Crixnell enter, his centipede-like body flowing across the floor with predatory grace. The Meridian Commander's segments clicked together in a rhythm that conveyed severe displeasure. "Continue the footage," Crixnell ordered, his mandibles snapping with finality. "All of it. This isn't cruelty, Instructor Kalmara. This is necessity." The Lumidian instructor's form flashed with indignation. "Admiral, with respect, these cadets are experiencing genuine psychological distress. Cadet Valen has already become physically ill, Cadet Virix shows signs of acute anxiety, and Cadet Shenna hasn't moved or spoken in over an hour." Thrace glanced at Shenna, the Orvelian exchange student whose tentacled form usually rippled with constant motion. She sat perfectly still, her normally iridescent skin a flat, lifeless grey. Her primary eye, the one that could perceive 17 different spectrums of light, stared unblinking at the frozen hologram. "They're military cadets," Crixnell said flatly, coiling his considerable length beside the instructor's podium. "If they cannot handle archived footage, how will they handle actual combat scenarios? Because no actual combat scenario in galactic history resembles what's on this recording," Kalmara shot back, her form flaring bright red. "These humans, they're not rational actors. They're not following any tactical doctrine we recognize. They're—" "Precisely why this lesson is essential," Crixnell interrupted. His compound eyes swept across the 32 cadets in the lecture hall, representing 20 different species from across the galactic concordance. "Computer, resume playback. Authorization Admiral Crixnell, security clearance Omega-7. The hologram sprang back to life, and Thrace felt his stomach clench again. The footage had jumped forward to something labeled Battle of Verdun, 1916. Human soldiers emerged from trenches, actual holes in the ground, and ran across muddy fields toward enemy positions. The leading wave fell almost immediately, cut down by primitive ballistic weapons. The second wave followed anyway, then a third, then a fourth. "Note the casualty rates," Crixnell narrated, his translator somehow conveying clinical detachment. "In 10 months of fighting over this location, humans suffered approximately 300,000 deaths. The strategic value of the territory was minimal. The tactical advantage gained was negligible, and yet both sides continued committing forces." Virix made a choking sound. That's more than my entire planet's population." "Computer, display total casualties for human conflicts, 20th century only," Crixnell commanded. A number appeared in the hologram's corner, 187 million. The lecture hall erupted in chaos. Cadets from species that communicated through color patterns flashed distress signals. Those with vocalizations cried out in disbelief. One insectoid, Cadets' antennae, simply fell off, an evolutionary defense mechanism triggered by extreme stress. Thrace sat frozen, his mind unable to process the number. 187 million deaths from a single species in 100 years. His entire home system contained only 40 million Andorians total, accumulated over 10,000 years of recorded history. Impossible, Jenna finally spoke, her voice a hollow whisper. No species could survive that level of population loss. Earth's human population at the start of their 20th century was approximately 1.6 billion, Crixnell stated. By the end, despite those losses, it had reached 6 billion. They reproduced faster than they died, Virik said slowly, horror dawning in his ember-colored eyes. Even in active warfare, they were still growing. Computer, show compilation 7. Human asymmetric warfare tactics, Crixnell ordered. The hologram shifted to show Vietnamese fighters emerging from underground tunnel systems to ambush soldiers equipped with vastly superior technology. Then Afghan resistance forces using primitive explosives against hovering aircraft. Then Iraqi insurgents turning consumer electronics into deadly traps. Observe their pattern, Crixnell continued. When faced with superior force, humans don't surrender or flee. They adapt, they innovate, they find weaknesses and exploit them with ruthless creativity. Thrace watched a human rebel fighter, barely more than a juvenile by the look of it, plant an improvised explosive device on a roadside. The crude weapon destroyed an armored vehicle worth more than that human's entire village would earn in a century. Why? Thrace heard himself asking. Why would they continue fighting when defeat is mathematically certain? Crixnell's segments rippled in what might have been a shrug. That, Cadet Valen, is the question that has occupied the Galactic Security Council for 3 centuries. Computer, jump to file Omega 77 Alpha, Human Special Warfare Training. What followed made the previous footage seem merciful by comparison. Thrace watched humans voluntarily subject themselves to near drowning. Watched them carry impossibly heavy loads across desert terrain until their bodies collapsed. Watched instructors put candidates through simulated torture designed to break their psychological resistance. The footage noted that candidates could quit at any time. This training was entirely voluntary. Most failed. Those who succeeded emerged as something that transcended normal biological limitations. Their elite warriors, Kalmara whispered, her form now a pale, sickly shade, are created through deliberate psychological trauma. Not trauma, Crixnell corrected. Transformation. They call it forging, like metalworking, applying extreme pressure and heat to create something stronger than the original material. The hologram showed a human soldier with the designation Navy SEAL, conducting surgery on his own leg wound, removing shrapnel without anesthesia while continuing to direct his team's tactical movements. Another showed a soldier carrying a wounded comrade through hostile territory for 3 days without rest, food, or medical supplies. I don't understand, Virix rumbled, smoke trickling from his nostrils in distress. My species has redundant organs, regenerating tissue, natural armor. We're biologically superior in every measurable way. But I couldn't do what I'm seeing. Neither could I, Kalmara admitted quietly. Neither could any species in this room. Computer, final compilation, Crixnell said, his tone softening slightly. Display human medical advances, civilian rescue operations, and disaster response. The hologram shifted to show humans pulling survivors from collapsed buildings, performing emergency surgery in war zones to save enemies as well as allies, running into burning structures to save strangers, medical teams working without sleep during plague outbreaks, civilian volunteers forming human chains to rescue people from floods. The same psychological architecture that makes them terrifying warriors, Crixnell explained, also makes them capable of remarkable altruism. They don't just fight harder than any species we've encountered. They sacrifice harder, they endure harder, they care harder. Shenna's tentacles finally moved, curling into a posture of deep confusion. How can both be true? How can they be simultaneously the most violent and most compassionate? Because for humans, Crixnell said, intensity is the default setting. Whatever they do absolutely. It's not that they lack fear or survival instinct. Their biology shows they have both. They simply have something else that overrides those instincts when they choose. What? Thrace asked. What could be strong enough to override survival instinct? Purpose, Kalmara answered, her form stabilizing to a contemplative blue. Meaning, the ability to believe that something, a person, an idea, a cause, matters more than their own continued existence. Crixnell's segments rippled in acknowledgement. Correct, and this brings us to the actual lesson, which none of your textbooks will tell you. He paused, letting silence fill the lecture hall. Earth is under quarantine, has been for 312 years. The room exploded with shocked vocalizations. Thrace felt his neck ridges darken to near black. Quarantine, several cadets echoed in various languages. The Galactic Concordance has been monitoring human civilization since they achieved atomic fission, Crixnell explained. We've scrambled their deep space transmissions, redirected their space probes, and maintained a policy of absolute non-contact. The quarantine will remain in place indefinitely. But they're primitive, protested a Ithrian cadet, her wings buzzing with agitation. Their fastest ships barely reach their own moon. Their weapons are centuries behind ours. Why would we fear contact? Crixnell's mandibles clicked together slowly, deliberately. Computer, run tactical simulation Omega 77 Bravo. Scenario. Human civilization acquires concordance-level technology and discovers the existence of the quarantine. The hologram transformed into a strategic display showing human expansion patterns, military deployments, and projected conflict timelines. The simulation ran for 30 seconds before displaying its conclusion in stark red text. Concordance defeat probability, 94.7%. The lecture hall fell silent. 32 cadets from 20 species stared at the impossible numbers. That simulation assumes humans start with our technology, Virik said slowly. But even then, we have numerical superiority, established infrastructure, thousands of years of military tradition. And they have psychological architecture that makes surrender literally incomprehensible to them, Crixnell interrupted. Run projection, human tactical adaptation, rate versus concordance response patterns. New numbers appeared. The simulation showed humans analyzing concordance tactics, identifying weaknesses, and developing counters in a fraction of the time any other species would require. Their projected innovation curve was nearly vertical. They don't just fight, Kalmara said quietly. They learn mid-battle, under fire, while dying. Computer, final simulation, Crixnell ordered, his voice heavy. Project outcome if humans discover the quarantine exists and interpret it as hostile containment. The hologram showed Earth's sun growing brighter in the display as humanity's military infrastructure expanded exponentially outward. The simulation assumed humans would treat the discovery not as first contact, but as evidence of an existing threat, and respond accordingly. The projected timeline showed the Concordance's defensive perimeter collapsing within 30 years. That's impossible, Thrace whispered. We've held galactic peace for 5,000 years. Our military has never fought a species with nothing to lose, Crixnell finished. Every concordant species makes the same calculation. Survival versus glory. When the equation tilts sufficiently, we withdraw, regroup, negotiate. It's rational. It preserves our populations and our civilizations. Humans don't calculate the same way, Shenna said, understanding finally dawning in her voice. We saw it in the footage. When the equation became impossible, they just changed the equation. Exactly, Crixnell confirmed. They don't accept defeat as a rational conclusion. They treat it as a temporary setback. And that makes them the single greatest threat to galactic stability since the Concordance's founding. Virix's scales had gone pale grey. So we keep them locked on Earth forever. Hope they never develop faster-than-light travel on their own. The Security Council debates this question constantly, Crixnell admitted. Some argue for more aggressive containment. Some propose carefully controlled contact, once humans demonstrate sufficient cultural evolution. Some suggest simply leaving a warning beacon at the edge of their system and hoping they interpret it correctly. And some, Kalmara added, her crystalline form dimming, argue we should establish contact now, on our terms, before they break quarantine on theirs. Which brings us to why you're all here, Crixnell said, his segments coiling in a posture of absolute seriousness. You are the next generation of Concordance military leadership. Statistically, sometime in your command careers, humanity will achieve faster-than-light travel. When that happens, the Concordance will face an existential choice. Welcome them as equals, maintain hostile quarantine, or attempt preemptive neutralization. War, Thrace said numbly. You're asking us to prepare for war with Earth. I'm asking you to understand what war with Earth would mean, Crixnell corrected, so that when the time comes, you can make informed decisions about whether such a war is survivable or even winnable. He gestured to the frozen hologram, still showing human faces, human determination, human sacrifice. These cadets you see throwing themselves at impossible odds. They represent approximately 0.01% of human military capacity. That's just their elite forces. Behind them are billions more who, if their history is any indication, would fight with identical determination. We're doomed, someone whispered from the back of the lecture hall. Not necessarily, Kalmara interjected, her form brightening slightly. Remember, humans are also capable of remarkable cooperation when they perceive shared purpose. Their own history shows multiple instances of former enemies becoming steadfast allies. The key is ensuring they perceive the concordance as partners rather than jailers. Crixnell's mandibles clicked agreement, which is why this course exists. Not to teach you to fear humans, but to respect them. To understand that when contact occurs, we cannot approach them with the patronizing superiority we've shown other emerging species. He paused, letting his words sink in. Because humans won't respond to superiority with submission. They'll respond with competition. And based on everything we've observed, they'll eventually win that competition through sheer psychological refusal to accept defeat. Thrace stared at the hologram, his mind reeling. Somewhere on that distant blue planet, humans continued their unknowing evolution, developing technology, refining tactics, forging their warriors in fires that would break any other species. And someday, probably sooner than anyone wanted to acknowledge, they would break free of their cosmic cage and discover they'd been watched, studied, and deliberately contained. What do you think they'll do? Thrace asked quietly. When they find out about the quarantine, Crixnell's response was immediate. Computer, display human historical quote database, search parameter, response to superior force. Quotes. Dozens of them, all expressing the same fundamental human philosophy, defiance in the face of impossible odds, death before submission, dying before enslavement. That, Crixnell said simply, is what they'll do. 6 months later, Thrace stood in Admiral Crixnell's private office, staring at the classified intelligence report on the desk's display. The report's header read, Flash Priority, Human Breakthrough in Quantum Field Manipulation. They've done it, Crixnell said without preamble. Not faster than light yet, but the theoretical framework is solid. Our analysts estimate they'll achieve practical FTL capability within 15 to 20 years. Thrace's neck ridges darkened. Does the Council know? Emergency session, convening next week. The question is no longer if we make contact, but how and when. Crixnell's segments coiled tightly. I'm assembling a task force to develop first contact protocols. You're being assigned to it. Me. Sir, I'm barely past cadet rank. You're one of the few officers who has genuinely studied humans without either dismissing them as primitives or romanticizing them as noble warriors, Crixnell interrupted. You've seen what they are. Dangerous, brilliant, and utterly unpredictable. That makes you more qualified than most admirals. Thrace looked at the report again, noting the names of the human scientists involved in the breakthrough. Just names, no faces. The concordance still prohibited visual contact with any humans to prevent psychological attachment that might compromise objective analysis. What if we can't make peace? Thrace asked. What if they see the quarantine as an act of war? Then we'll discover whether our simulations were accurate, Crixnell said grimly, and hope that humans' capacity for mercy matches their capacity for violence. Through the office's viewport, stars glittered in the darkness. Somewhere out there, approaching faster than anyone had predicted, was a small blue planet full of creatures who had turned suffering into strength, fear into fuel, and impossible odds into personal challenges. The galaxy, Thrace realized, was about to discover what humanity had known for millennia. That the most dangerous moment in any relationship isn't when you first meet your enemy, but when you finally realize you might have created one through your own fear. And as his ancestors had written in the old Andorian texts, before their species had achieved space flight and forgotten the lesson. The cage that protects becomes the prison that provokes, and the prisoner who breaks free remembers who built the bars.